Hey, and welcome into the Big Ten Huddle. We are on time tonight. How about that? Right as the clock hits zero, we are coming at you with Big Ten Huddle content. We are super glad to be here. You got me, JR, your host, and my co-host, Zack Guggenheim, here with us once again. No delay, no phone from the retreat this time. Zack is here. He has his mic. He has his normal internet. Zack, how does it feel to be back with your microphone back in your studio?
First of all, I want to clear up the rumors. I am not the fan that went to the wrong game.
No.
I legit was at a press or not a press conference, at a retreat that was kind of in the boonies, and it feels good to be back with a microphone so you can hear me shout in real volume.
We can't wait. We cannot wait. Thank you so much for being here, everybody. If you are here with us live right now, or if you are listening on podcast, we do greatly appreciate that. If you do watch on YouTube, please know we also have a podcast version that you can listen to. That helps us out. If you miss, our preferred listening service is the YouTube, but if you prefer podcasts or something like that, always stay up to date, and please do like and subscribe. That always helps the channel get noticed more, and that tells YouTube to push this out to more people. So we do appreciate that. We are going to get into our first topic right away, which is the playoff semifinals. We're going to give some of our takeaways, some recaps, stuff like that. Ohio State wins 28-14. Notre Dame takes down Penn State 27-24. And Zack, the most important stat, the Big Ten is 5-1 against the SEC in the playoffs. It is a great day to be or not in the playoffs, in the bowl games and playoffs. It is a great day to be a Big Ten fan. What are some of your takeaways from the playoffs semifinals?
So I want to start, and this includes both, I think, Ohio State, Texas, and the Big Ten SEC conversation. I I think, I mean, we're both Ohio State fans, and I think most Ohio State fans felt like we were going to have a heart attack in the third quarter because it was like we've seen this movie. Ryan Day's lost momentum. The team is puckering up, so to speak. We're going to lose. Uh, and then something magical happened. They fought back and won against the number 3 team in the country. Remember, the rankings, Texas was number 3 in the college football playoff rankings. They were not 5. That was the seed. And as honestly, I thought Ohio State played a pretty bad game overall. I thought they played like a C+ game, and I think that's actually being generous because of how much they shot themselves in the foot. I mean, it was ridiculous. I think 4 drives in the first half, they could have had positive momentum to score, and penalties and drops were killers for those drives. And I thought going into that game, Ohio State was going to have to score and make it hard on Texas. And instead, they were always one score ahead or tied. And I'm like, man, that's just not how you win when you're Ohio State. But Ryan Day pulled it off. He got his team to believe. The seniors that he recruited, his first recruit he ever recruited, Jack Sawyer, gets that game-clinching play. But not only that, the drive before that, over 7 minutes, 13 plays, third down conversion, fourth down conversion. They were tough. And he didn't talk about toughness. And he did it against the big bad SEC, which I think is remarkable because what Ryan Day has done over these past 3 playoff games, he has beaten 2 top 5 teams. What do we say going into the season? He couldn't beat top 5 teams. He's beaten 4 of them this year. He's beaten 4. He couldn't win tough slug it out games. He just won a slug it out game in someone else's backyard. And he did it when they were losing momentum. And he is, I believe, the first Ohio State head coach with multiple wins against the SEC in his career.
It is the first time in Ohio State football program history that they ever have gotten 2 wins against current SEC teams in the same season. Not in the same year, because Tennessee happened in 2024. Texas
Right.
happened in 2025. So there is a technicality there, but in the same season, which is pretty incredible.
Yeah.
Phillips says Texas has been overrated all season. One early high-ranked win tricked everyone. Yeah, I mean that's what got them their number 3 ranking, right? Now they did have, like we pointed out in the preview, they did have a very highly rated recruiting class, but I think you saw what happened when you have a person calling plays that overthinks everything. You get a pitch play at the goal line that loses you 7 yards and basically puts you on the 10-yard line when instead of being on the 1 yard line. Like that that was detrimental to this team when they were trying to, punch the ball in at the goal line. So you can have the best players out there and you can have the best wins ever, but if you're going to make decisions like that late in the game, it's going to screw you. Now, thankfully for Ohio State fans, Sark and those guys made worse decisions than Ohio State did. Ohio State had a lot of penalties and stuff like that, but Ohio State was able to capitalize on those bad decisions by Texas, and a lot of those bad decisions by Texas happened later in the game rather than kind of in the middle of the game when Ohio State was able to sustain it.
Can I ask a question on that play? Because I agree that it seemed like a bad decision. Was it a bad decision because Ohio State has Caleb Downs?
I think so. I was talking about it after the game a little bit. So, like, Ohio State has such a good goal line defense. Like, the rushing rate of success for teams against Ohio State's goal line defense, and that's like like within 3 yards of the goal line, is something crazy like 20%. So, if you're gonna follow the numbers, which Sark does, you're going to look at that and say, well, it makes no sense for us to try to run the ball, 4 times straight up the middle because the numbers say we're not going to get it. You're not going to get it in one of those 4 times. And so he tried to get too cute and say, well, let's run around, which is the type of stuff that Ryan Day used to do. But what he really should have done is he really should have got in the middle of the huddle and said, guys, buck up because right now this is how you get to a national championship game right here. Nothing cute, just push the guy in front of you. And he didn't do that because right now, I don't know if it'll change, but right now that's not who Sark is. Sark is outsmart you, do all that kind of stuff, but you weren't going to outsmart Caleb Downs. You weren't going to outsmart this Ohio State defense. They were going to get the play.
Yeah, I mean, so anyway, I think my overall point in that is I think this, like, he still has the Michigan monkey, but I think this game kind of breaks the curse for Ryan Day. And I think that's huge because he has, regardless of Texas and some of their inefficiency, this is the best roster they've played all year. Best defense they've played all year, like in terms of talent, all 3 levels. They had a really good plan for Jeremiah Smith. And I think offensive personnel, probably the best offensive line they faced. Best receiving core outside of Oregon that they faced. And they held them to 14 points. And they did it when playing B- to a C game. And that game, that type of game over the years has gotten Ryan Day beat. And instead he persevered and like the players persevered. But I just think it's important for all the mess we talked about Ryan Day. He deserves a lot of kudos. And the other coach I think that deserves a lot of credit is Jim Knowles. My goodness, that dude can coach. And he has just completely, this defense is, I think, the best defense I've ever seen that Ohio State has had.
Yeah, we got some Jim Knowles talk later in the episode. I think will be interesting to discuss. But
yeah,
no, I agree with you. I mean, this Ohio State defense, this is one of the best defenses that I've ever seen. Not just at Ohio State, in all of college football. And I'm not trying to sound like a homer by saying that. I'm being genuine here. This current defense that you have with the pass rush and the secondary and the linebackers you get downhill, like if you're looking for a weakness in this defense, maybe it's linebackers in coverage, but then you have Sonny Styles go up and hit the tight end the way he did and completely knock the ball out. It's like, okay, well, maybe you can get to the ball if the linebacker's covering you, but guess what? He's just going to completely blow you up and you're going to not know where you are after he hits you. So, like, if that's the weakness, not bad. So the only team that remains to be able to score over 17 points on Ohio State this season is Oregon. No other team has scored more than 17 points on Ohio State's defense this year, which is just absolutely crazy.
That's crazy. But, that is crazy.
What about or you have anything else on Ohio State Ohio State, Texas before we move on to Penn State, Notre Dame?
No, I think it's just important. Like, I think Texas can be multiple things at once. Like, I think we can say, yeah, they didn't really prove much in the regular season and even in the playoffs. And also their roster was insane. And I think Texas actually, I don't think they played their A game either, but they are the best roster that Ohio State has faced and will face. Like, Notre Dame's really good. But for all the people saying, well, Notre Dame could really challenge Ohio State better than Texas could. I'm sorry. Like, I think Ohio State can lose, but it's not going to be because Notre Dame is as talented as Texas. They're not. And they won't face, like, nobody they faced was more talented than Texas this year.
Yeah, I mean, I think Notre Dame has some good players. I think they have more speed than they've had in the past, and I think that makes a difference for them. A difference for them this year. But I just look at that defensive line, and that defensive line without Riley Mills, it's just so small. And I even watching against Penn State was able to run the ball against that defensive line for Notre Dame. I mean, Penn State had a rushing success rate of 50 in that game. Like, to have a rushing success rate of 50 and only like to throw the ball as much as they did, I really have to question some of the stuff with Andy Kotelnicki. They threw the ball 23 times. I know they ran it nearly 40 times between Singleton and Allen, but still, like, the amount of success you were having, especially in the first half with the push you were getting on that offensive line, it was crazy. So we're not going to preview the Ohio State Notre Dame game yet. I do want to wait until Tuesday to preview that. But if I'm looking at this really early, I think Notre Dame is a very well coached team. I think it's one of the best coached teams in the nation. You and I, after the Penn State game, went on to talk about Marcus Freeman and what he's done. Notre Dame is going to try and play the field position battle. They are going to try to play the battle where they take away Jeremiah Smith and they make Ohio State make mistakes. My very earliest thing I say about it is if Ohio State makes mistakes, Notre Dame has a chance. But if Ohio State plays mistake-free, if they play a game where they are able to move the ball down the field methodically, Notre Dame doesn't stand a chance.
Yep.
So
yeah, this isn't for now, but a question I think would be fun for us to answer is, who on Notre Dame starting 22 would start for Ohio State this year?
Oh my.
That's for Tuesday.
Okay.
I'm not saying we have to do it now, but
yeah, I'd have to do a little more research. But yeah, so yeah, Doug Shepard says Penn State could have won if they didn't pass at all.
Yeah.
Well, and the truth was, I said it in the post game, like, Penn State did what Notre Dame wanted them to do. I still believe Penn State's the better team between Penn State and Notre Dame. The problem is that Notre Dame's a better coach team. Notre Dame was a more disciplined team. So discipline and coaching can get you a long way. But that was the issue that Penn State and Notre Dame ran into because Penn State had a sack knocked off the board with Zane Durant, hands to the face. They fell down in coverage, and a wide receiver got not only his first, Notre Dame's first receiver with over 100 yards this season, not in the playoffs, not in the second half of the season. The first wide receiver that had 100 yards in a game this season happened for Notre Dame in that Penn State game, and it happened because that cornerback fell down, and then the wide receiver was one-on-one with the safety and was able to juke him and move on. Like, that to me, if I'm Ryan Day at Ohio State, I am watching that game with the guys and saying, don't beat yourself.
Yep.
Because if you make mistakes like Penn State did, you can be the better team, and Penn State will take, or Notre Dame will take advantage of it and beat you. It comes down to, will Ohio State beat themselves?
Yeah. Well, and I think that's what makes, and we talked about it in the post game. I think that's what makes this Penn State run so difficult to judge, because I really believe this, and I don't think enough people will do this. Penn State deserves a ton of credit for being in the semis. And people will say, well, they just beat Boise or SMU. And I'm here to tell you, look, this is the new world of college football. They beat who was in front of them. They got to the finals or the semifinals, and they were 3 points away from a national championship. And if you're going to be like, well, that, they had a bad way to get there, yada, yada, yada. Look, this is the new world. You never made the playoff in the first 10 years with the 4-team format. This format was made for you in mind to give you a shot, and you got your shot and you made the most of it. And so I think you have to give James Franklin credit for that. You have to give Andy Kotelnicki credit. But I think where this really falls short is Notre Dame made mistakes in this game. They threw, Riley Leonard threw a couple of picks, and one was a bad pick, right? Did not see denied Dennis Sutton. And the two things that stand out to me, I rewatched it yesterday or today. I forget when I rewatched it, but they stopped running the ball in the second half, and they didn't run it in key spots in the first half. I'm like, what are you guys doing? You're gashing them. They had over 140 yards rushing in the first half, and they kind of went away from it. And with that, Drew Aller, his mechanics in that game, like, he was always drifting back, even when he didn't need to. And I'm just like, man, I don't know who is working with him to help develop him as a passer, but he needs a lot of work to correct some of it's just sloppy mechanics.
It's lower body in a lot of ways. I mean, his feet aren't there. His hips aren't going in motion with the rest of his body. I don't. Who is the quarterback coach at Penn State? Is it Kotelnicki? It's not Kotelnicki, is it?
Let me go research that real quick.
I'll have to look it up. Yeah, look it up really fast. Normally I know that kind of stuff, but yeah, I mean, Aller's got to fix some things, but at the same time, like, there are times when he's skittish back there, and I get it. I get, like, to me, it's not so much he doesn't trust his offensive line. To me, it's what I said about the SMU game. I don't know if he trusts his receivers, which I know it sucks every time we talk about Penn State, it seems to come back to the receivers. But, like, this is something that James Franklin has to address. This is something that James Franklin has to figure out, because even though, like, you can get away with subpar receivers, which I think Notre Dame has gotten away with. They've not been great, but they've also not been bad, but they've been manageable enough to throw the ball to them this season. I mean, zero catches for wide receivers in this game against Notre Dame. You give them one wide receiver, that you give Drew Aller one wide receiver he could throw to, this offense is completely different. And I know there were people talking about Harrison Wallace and he's gotten better and all that stuff, but, like, I don't care how much better you've gotten. You got to catch a ball in the semifinals of the playoffs, at least one.
Yeah. Kirk Herbstreit made a good point on game day that part of the interception, you have to blame Aller. Like, you just don't throw across your body to the middle of the field. But it was also a terrible route by Amari Evans. And, he should have gone over rather than try to duck under. And that's what helped lead to the interception. It led the corner right to the ball. And so it was a sloppy route combined with a really bad decision by the quarterback. And that's why they lost the game. Ultimately, it was bad QB play, but also bad wide receiver play. Danny O'Brien is the Penn State quarterbacks coach. who he was an offensive grad assistant. I feel like if you want to win at this level, you got to get someone who can really develop quarterbacks. I don't know if I want a first year guy who played quarterback at Maryland. No offense to you Maryland fans. And I don't know what, Marcus Hagans is the wide receivers coach there. He's also the offensive recruiting coordinator. He was hired in 2023. He's in his second season with the team. Look, if I'm James Franklin, I go to those two guys. I'm like, listen, we need elite wide receivers and elite quarterback play. Get it done. Develop your guys.
Yeah. Sorry, Brian. I brought up the wrong comment there. I was going to say Fisherman making my point for me there. Not that I don't want your comment up, Brian. Get to it in a second. But yeah, I mean, that's exactly right. Like, he has to have better footwork. He has to have a better QB coach or whatever is going on there. Or just something with the QB development at Penn State has to change, because you are not going to win with quarterbacks who have bad fundamentals. You saw what happened, when who was the guy that Michigan brought in? It was Kurt Campbell, who came in as the quarterback coach for Michigan for J.J. McCarthy and fixed a lot of the things and helped him out in a lot of ways. Now, Kurt Campbell didn't turn out to be such a good offensive coordinator, but he was a good quarterback coach for J.J. McCarthy and helped him in a lot of ways. There are certain guys like that just can come in and help fix a lot of these mechanics and stuff to help them. And Danny O'Brien, unfortunately, doesn't seem to be that guy. Now, it is his first year with the quarterbacks, so I don't know who the guy was in 2023, but as far as I'm concerned, like, it wasn't good enough this year. You have to find somebody else. You have to find somebody else. You have to find a new wide receiver coach, as far as I'm concerned, because right now it's not good enough. You got a lot of good on the defensive coaching staff, but if I'm Andy Kotelnicki, I'm going to James Franklin and I'm saying, look, we gotta do some things different with this staff if we're ever gonna reach the mountaintop and do more than what we've done. So.
Yeah. One last comment on that. It's interesting how James Franklin and Ryan Day were very much in the same boat, and that Ryan Day accomplished and I think beat the curse that he was under. James Franklin did not, which I think, and again, I want to end on this because we got ripped apart a little bit on our James Franklin commentary. And I think people were thinking that we were saying he should be fired. I don't think he should be fired.
We clearly said he should stay at the end.
Yeah. and I think you need to celebrate that you got to the semifinals and you made it to the Big Ten championship game. Like, those are big deals. And at the same time, if your hope is to get to the mountaintop, which I think you just said really well, JR, you want more, but also celebrate that you made it to the Final Four. Like, that should be a banner for Penn State. Like, it really should. And I think we should celebrate that.
Yeah, no, I mean, it should be celebrated. Like, I don't want the playoffs to be, well, if we didn't win the national championship, it doesn't mean anything. It still means something that you were able to get to the Final Four. You were, 3 points away from beating Notre Dame. You were a couple of plays away from beating Notre Dame with your defense. You scored enough points, but unfortunately, mistakes and penalties really hindered that. But I mean, you look at it and you say, what is the piece that we need where we don't have to play a perfect game? We can still make mistakes because mistakes are going to happen. Teams are just not perfect, but we can still win despite those mistakes. And a lot of it is like what we talked about with Ohio State. Ryan Day got to the point where now mistakes are being made on offense, but the defense is good enough, and plays are able to be made to win that game late. So, Big Ten SEC. Zach, the Big Ten is 5-1 against the SEC. There's a lot of talk out there. The SEC has fallen. The SEC, this, that, and the other. I don't know if it's fallen for good. I said in my weaker SEC video that to me it's gonna be blow for blow each year. Big Ten SEC. Unfortunately, I don't know if that's enough to get rid of the SEC bias and stuff like that. I think eventually you're gonna have to see better recruiting rankings for the Big Ten in order for that to happen. But I think at least for now, we can confidently say the Big Ten had a better season this year than the SEC, and people are at the very least questioning their takes on the SEC and if they should still continue to be high on them. Everybody but Andy Staples and Ari Wasserman, they had South Carolina, Auburn, and Florida in their top 10. Still have no idea how you come to that conclusion, but apparently they had Illinois 12th, which, like, that's stupid. Illinois should be top 10.
Yeah. I'll give Andy and Ari the benefit of the doubt just because I know Ari's stick is like stars matter. And so my guess is he kind of just looked at recruit. I would need to look at it further, but I don't know if you feel this way. I feel like those way too early top 10s are, especially in this world, they're just so hard to predict. And they just lend itself to bias. Because you're like, I don't know who half the roster is going to be now with the transfer portal and everything like that. I think, we've trolled the SEC a bit. I do think it's fascinating to see a lot of SEC caliber, like the SEC top tier players are going to other schools. Like Carson Beck going to Miami of all places.
Elijah Pritchett, is it Pritchard or Pritchett going to Nebraska? That's huge.
Yeah. And I think so. I think it was on Kings of the North or another podcast I was listening to, but they made a good point. The issue that NIL is bringing into play is that the Deep South, yes, they have money, but not to the extent that some of these northern metropolises have, right? Like you have the same fan bases, but you have wealthier fans and you have wealthier constituents. I mean, Oregon is, the biggest example of that. You have Phil Knight over there. And obviously you have some schools in the SEC. Texas they've got a big pocketbook. But like Alabama and Georgia, all these schools, they have great tradition. And they certainly have some deep pockets, but not to the extent that Ohio State, Penn State, Michigan, all those other schools have.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, go.
I was going to say it was Steve Deese actually, which on the Michigan podcast, which is not something I frequently listen to, but every now and then, I do listen to what he has to say, and he was actually the one that made a lot of sense when he was talking about the difference between the money up north and a lot of the money down south, which he was saying, a lot of the rich boosters, not rich people in general, but a lot of the rich boosters, if you notice, down south are a lot of guys who, own car dealerships and kind of have like local stuff that, is big. He said, but there's guys up north who like Larry Ellison, who's the guy, Lex for Ohio State.
Is it Wes Lexner?
Yeah, Wes Lexner. I almost said Lex Luthor, and I was like, no, that's a super villain. That's not an NIL donor.
Our next quarterback
Uncle T
is Clark
for Michigan, right? Yeah. Who's Uncle T? We still don't know.
Clark Kent just committed to Ohio State, by the way.
Oh man, I thought he was already there. I thought his name was Jeremiah Smith. Anyway, but that's like when Steve Deese was talking about it, it actually made a whole lot more sense, and it kind of made it click in my brain where it's like this. It's not just that SEC schools are the only ones paying anymore. That's not the only thing that's it, because it wasn't happening with every player. Right, it was happening with a lot of big players, but it wasn't every player. Not every single player got a McDonald's bag with a pile of cash in it. But now it's legal for everyone. It's out there, and you are seeing fans of northern schools who have cared so much and been beaten down for so long, giving and trying to get their teams to be better. I mean, Phil Knight is basically like giving everything he has to Oregon for a national championship, which like people want to mock that. I personally don't mock it because it's like, you know what? If I had a Phil Knight for my school, I'd be happy about it. And I wouldn't care. Like people want to mock about like oh, this team pays this much, this team pays this much. It's like, okay, well, this team is really good at fundraising, and this team's not really good at fundraising. What do you want to do about it? But to me, that is one of the most significant things. And the other one, somebody mentioned it earlier. It's Saban is gone. Like the allure of beating Saban no longer exists in the SEC. If anybody beat Saban, they were automatically thrust to this new height, right? Kirby Smart beat Saban one time, and he has lived off that one victory versus Saban for so long. He's like, what, 1-4 against Saban or something like that? He's lived off that victory for so long. Josh Heupel was declared one of the best coaches in the country simply because he beat Nick Saban. Now, I'm not saying he's a bad coach, but there were people talking about top 5 after he beat Saban. Like, just the perception of your school, your coach, and everything from just beating Saban is huge. Yep. And that is no longer there. There is not a Saban in college football right now, other than Kirby Smart, maybe. But even he's not Saban. He has 2 national championships, but he's not Saban yet.
No, and I think the difference between Saban and everybody else, he had the reputation and he also got the talent. And he backed it up year in and year out. And so even if they didn't win the national championship, they were always close, and he rarely got out-coached. Whereas I think even with Kirby Smart, you saw it in the Notre Dame game. Marcus Freeman out-coached him. And I don't think where's my train of thought going? Kirby Smart's a really good coach. Don't get me wrong.
Of course he is. Yeah.
But I think the other issue with Kirby right now is, Saban ran a pretty clean program, asterisks with, maybe financial stuff going on. But in terms of like stuff off the field, Kirby has not. And there's a lot of junk that needs to get cleaned up there that we've already been into. But you're right. There's no big fish right now, which I think is why this playoff has been so exhilarating. Is you had four coaches and now just 2 who have never won a national championship.
Yeah, no, for sure. And it's kind of like who is going to become that new, coach with the national championship. Because right now there's only 2. It's Dabo and Kirby. Both of them aren't in it anymore. Both of them didn't even win a playoff game this year. So yeah, I will say one thing and then we'll move on. The thing with Kirby is he has got to figure some stuff out. I heard Juck on Bucks talking about it. Like there was a story written by The Athletic where they went through and they anonymously interviewed a bunch of players about their NIL experience. And one player that said he visited multiple different schools and talked to multiple different coaches. Obviously, this isn't the only situation where this happens, but it was the only situation where it happened for him. And he said he visited schools both in the SEC and the Big Ten. And he said the only school where the coach talked NIL with him, which you're really not supposed to do, but again, it's the wild, wild west. Nobody cares right now. Tampering goes everywhere. Nobody cares. But he said the only coach that talked NIL with him and his family was Kirby Smart. He said every other coach left the room. Every other coach said, yes, our NIL collective will take care of you. But it was Kirby Smart that sat there at the table with the NIL collective representatives and said, here's how much we're paying you, and I don't know. I thought that was really interesting that he was the only one this player had that interaction with.
Yeah. It is interesting.
Yeah.
Real quick. How, I obviously the Big Ten whipped the SEC in bowl season, and that's great. How much does that really, how much can we actually take away from it?
We can take away that the Big Ten can be better than the SEC. That's what we can take away. Last year, you had the thought of it, Michigan took down Alabama, stuff like that. It was like, oh, okay, like we're starting to see this. This year, you actually have the argument now of like, well, there weren't 2 SEC teams in the playoffs.
Yep.
They weren't getting the benefit of the doubt the entire time. Look what happens when you put multiple teams from every conference, not just SEC, but the Big Ten and the ACC as well. Look what happens now. Like, I
Yeah.
guess both ACC teams lost early, but you saw two Big Ten teams in the semifinals of the playoffs, where it's
Yep.
like you didn't see any. You saw one SEC team and one independent team. Three Northern teams. So yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Let's go ahead and hit a commercial really fast, Zach, and then we'll come back and we will talk about the Minnesota defensive coordinator and Jim Knowles with what's going on there. So stick with us, everybody. We'll be right back. Have you ever wanted to watch all 22 film, that film the coaches watch? Well, now you can. Introducing the Coaches Film Room. Over at Minutes to Sports, former college coach Zack Smith breaks down film of the most relevant teams in college football with a bit of a Big Ten lead. It's not free, so you'll need to sign up for the Colonel tier, which is $25 a month, but I can attest to you that it is far more worth it than that. With about 4 to 8 games per week, this is worth so much more money, not to mention Zach's analysis, making you a smarter football fan. Go check it out. The links are in the description, minutestosports.com. You won't be sorry. Back here on the Big Ten Huddle, please do like and subscribe. We definitely appreciate it. There is always a large amount of people that watch the show that do not subscribe, and I know for some of you, might not think about it, or you might not care, but it does help us out if you subscribe. So please subscribe to the channel. Please do like the video. That helps us out, and we just really really appreciate it. We not only do we do our Sunday and Tuesday show, but we have all other kinds of good content that we put out there as well. We have basketball content. Me and Big Jeff just did a video yesterday about returning players that I thought was excellent. So just a lot of content for you guys. Some more content we have is that Miami has hired the Minnesota defensive coordinator, Corey Hetherman. Now, this marks 2 years in a row that a coordinator was hired away from the defensive coordinator, I believe, because Joe Rossi was hired to Michigan State 2 years ago. Kirk Soraka was hired to Rutgers. This year, Corey Hetherman is hired to Miami, going outside the Big Ten down to Miami. Yes, they have deep pockets, but that is still a school that does not make nearly as much as the Big Ten does. And we can talk about the impact it has for Minnesota, and I do think there's a conversation there, but I do want to steer this in the direction of, does Minnesota have a problem, Zach? Because if you look at the numbers and how much they're paying their assistant coaches, it's not good. And it's one of the reasons why I believe you're starting to see some of these coordinators leaving. So, Zach, if you want to maybe comment on, the loss of the defensive coordinator for Minnesota, and then we'll get into the discussion of the money, the financial stuff like that.
Yeah, I mean, I think just real quick, I think one of the things that I'm concerned about for Minnesota is, does Coy Parrish go somewhere else?
Mm-hmm.
Because he's an uber, like, one of the best freshmen in the country, one of the best players in the country. He was, thinking about Ohio State before he stayed home at Minnesota. Does he start thinking, maybe the Buckeyes are the right team to go to now that my defensive coordinator's gone? Because like that defensive coordinator, Hetherman was really good for them this year. I mean, that defense we saw it against Virginia Tech. We saw it throughout the season. Minnesota was very good defensively. And I think this is a huge loss for Minnesota. And I think the biggest problem is we saw it, you've seen it at other schools. When you don't have stability with your coordinators, it really becomes difficult to continue to learn new systems year after year after year. And so if anything else, like Hetherman did a good job, but just now all of your defensive players who have been there for a few years, you got to learn a third system in 3 years. Like, you could do it, but it's just you see the difference between that versus an Ohio State who's now been in Jim Knowles' system for 3 years, and they can evolve it through like over time. So I think it's a big loss for longevity. I think Hetherman's a good coach, and I think it's going to be tough to get a good defensive coordinator to replace him.
Yeah, I mean, they found Hetherman, so I'm sure they'll find somebody again. PJ Fleck has proven to be able to go out and make good hires from smaller situations, but To me, the biggest issue here is that Minnesota is just they're just not paying their coaches
Yeah.
enough to be able to retain them. Of all the Big Ten schools that submit how much they pay their coaches, which you don't have to if you're a private school. USC, Penn State, and Northwestern do not have to. But when you consider, and I'm getting some of this from Gopher Illustrated on 24/7, but when you consider how much James Franklin and Lincoln Riley are making, it's very fair to believe that Minnesota and Northwestern are the two schools that are at the bottom of paying their not just their head coach but their assistant coach's salary out there among everybody else. PJ Fleck has actually played rather or paid rather well, but his assistant coaches are not paid like it. And then you look at the rival schools. Iowa is paying $3 million more than Minnesota is for their coaches. Wisconsin is paying almost $1 million more, 776,000. But we saw what happened with Wisconsin and Brett Bielema when Wisconsin refused to pay his assistant coaches more. He left and he went to Arkansas, a worse job where he was not going to be successful, but he felt like at least here I can pay my assistant coaches and try to do something, because he was losing a bunch of assistant coaches because they weren't paying him well. So for me, like, I don't know, like some Minnesota fans are going to get mad at me for this, and that's fine. Whatever. You can be mad at me, but I'm advocating for your fandom right now that your school will get out of the gutter and go pay some assistant coaches. Stop acting like this is the old Big Ten where we're not making as much money as everybody else. The Big Ten Conference has the largest payout to their schools, especially now with Penn State making the semifinals, Ohio State making the semifinals, Indiana and Oregon making the playoffs. Like, there are payouts for your conference that go to everybody else. And at some point, if you're not going to invest, and I'm not saying I want this to happen, I'm just being real. At some point, if schools are not going to invest in their football program and their coaches and everything else, there will be a time where they say, get out. Again, I'm not advocating for that. I don't want that to happen. But when Ohio State and Penn State and Oregon and all these other schools are bringing in money, eventually they're going to say, why are we keeping these freeloaders on? Because they're not making anything, and they're not paying anybody. They're just taking the money in, and they're not paying anybody. And so eventually you're going to find people say, which again, I don't want to happen. You're just going to find them saying, why are they in this conference if they're not going to actually try to win with the money they're making? Am I being fair there, Zach? I'm not trying to be critical of the Minnesota fans. I do want the best for Minnesota fans. Like, I think Minnesota fans should want this. What are your thoughts?
Well, I would be slow to think that they would get kicked out of the conference. I think that's obviously
like worst case scenario.
Yeah, but I think that's like a 20-year down the road.
Right.
Maybe that's maybe 10. I don't know, but I'm not there yet. But I do think the point that I think you're making that I think can be backed up. USA Today has data of all the schools and the assistant pay combined for every school that is public. Here are some schools that have more, they pay more to their assistants than Minnesota. Oklahoma State, Big 12 school. NC State, ACC school. North Carolina, ACC school. Let's see. Indiana, Rutgers, Maryland, all Big Ten. Virginia Tech, ACC. Wisconsin.
Virginia Tech is so awful. They just destroyed them in their bowl game.
I know. And they have more. Wisconsin, Illinois, Texas Tech, Big 12 school.
That's ridiculous.
Mississippi State, who is awful right now. Yes. Georgia Tech, who's in the ACC. Yep. Like Kansas in the Big 12, Louisville in the ACC, Kansas State in the Big 12.
How much more does Kansas pay?
Kansas,
does it give you a number?
Yeah, Kansas, I believe, is somewhat comparable. They're at 4.8 million, and Minnesota's at is right around 4.6. So but that Minnesota,
but still,
and
you shouldn't be on Kansas's level if you're a Big Ten team.
Yeah. Now, I think part of the problem is UCLA is right around where Minnesota is too. So there's precedent But I think if you're Minnesota, what I say is I need to at least match Wisconsin. Like they're
Yeah.
our rival. We need to match them. And Wisconsin, let me go back up here for a minute. Wisconsin, I believe, was paying. No, I bypassed it. Um,
Well,
where is
I'll just say
Wisconsin?
really fast before you get to that. Like, I'm not trying to like point at Minnesota here because as you're pointing out, UCLA is doing this a little bit too. To me, and I understand UCLA a little bit because I don't think they're getting a full Big Ten payout. Yeah, so
Mhm.
I understand that a little bit. Don't like it, don't agree with it, but I understand it a little bit. To me, like I'm saying this to every school in the Big Ten that is refusing to put money into their football program.
Yeah.
I am praising programs like Illinois and Indiana that
Yep.
have dumped more money into those programs. And granted, those programs have seen success lately, so that's one of the reasons why they're doing it. But it's not like Minnesota hasn't seen success. Minnesota had an 11-win season a few years
Yep.
ago. Like you give PJ Fleck the money, he can make it happen. I get not a lot of people like him. They think he's goofy and stuff like that. I think he's got some quirks to him as well, but I find him kind of endearing at times as well. But like it's not like they have some bum coach who can't do anything. They got a coach
Right.
that can do something. And you're
Yep.
not giving him money and you're not putting money into your coaching staff. Like to me, it's like if not now, when?
Yeah. I would make the argument, and this might be a little overreach, but Utah's had a good run. They are in the Big 12 though, so they don't have the type of money from the conference at least. But their assistant coach payout is 8.27 about 8.3 million dollars for all their assistants. I don't think there should be a Big 10 school below that.
I agree.
And now that's taking into account that only a few are. Michigan is above that. Believe it or not, I don't think Oregon's not there yet, which is insane. But the reality is, if you're getting outpaced by a Big 12 school or even an ACC school, which Florida State outpaces them as well, which is hilarious because they're awful.
I understand like Florida State and Miami and some places like that
Right.
because they have seen the success and they are vying for more right now. Like they're the ones out there that are saying like we want more from the ACC because we are trying to funnel money into our program, right?
Yep.
So I do understand that a little bit, but go ahead. Sorry.
Well, and I think so. Utah is one of the they've made the right move in investing in their coaching staff, and these programs need to be similar to Utah, and they have the resources to do it, at least from the TV contracts and the payouts. And I like if I'm the head coach, PJ Fleck, or any of these programs, if I'm Dan Lanning, right? Like Dan Lanning, they pay their assistants really well. They're right around the same number as Utah. But if I'm these programs, I'm saying, hey, we are not below, $6 million minimum for our pool of assistants. And that's minimum, I think bare minimum. But there's a lot that are below that. And I think the reality of where college football and what these coaches are worth, you got to try to retain them. And they're doing so much more work now than just X's and O's work. I mean, they're recruiting, they have to re-recruit their players every year. So like they deserve it from a compensation standpoint too. So I don't know why you don't, with the way the sport is changing and with the money that you're getting as a program.
Yeah. No, I totally agree. To me, it just the amount of money you put into your program, it speaks to how much you care. And to me, right now, I think it's sad for Minnesota fans that Minnesota, the university or program or whatever, is communicating to their fans they do not care.
Mm-hmm.
And we can bring up all the examples in the world about like, well, this team pays a high amount of money to their coaching staff and they're not very good. I bet the fans feel better that they care though. And guess what?
Yep.
They have seen success before. Maybe there's not success right now, But
Mhm.
I guarantee a place that spends a lot of money on their coaching staffs has seen success before. You're not seeing a Kansas, paying $10+ million to their coaching staff. You're not seeing, you know, name your other school that's been terrible for a long time, not pay money to their coaching staffs, because
Right.
eventually, yes, you can get coaching hires wrong and stuff like that, but eventually you're going to hit the right one, and it's going to do a lot for you. This Ohio State went through this
Yep.
after Jim Tressel. Jim Tressel, great coach, but he was not paying his coaches anything, and it was really hard for him to hold on to his coaches. Urban Meyer comes in. Urban Meyer comes in from an SEC school, and he says, "You you want me to hire coaches with this?" And they were like, "Yeah." And he was like, "Not happening. You want me to come work here? You're gonna have to pay more money." And Ohio State cared enough about their program to say, "Okay, we'll pay more money." So I don't know if this is just on the university. I don't know if this is on PJ Fleck, that it needs to get tougher with the university and say, "I need more coaches, or I need more, salary for my coaches." I don't know all the internal workings, but what I do know is that this Minnesota program has the opportunity to do more, but
Hmm.
you're not going to do more if you keep losing coordinators every single year to an ACC school that you should be paying more money than. So,
Agreed.
all right. Good conversation there, Zach. The other conversation we have is that there are rumors that Jim Knowles could be on the move to Oklahoma. Now, we are about to get as college football gets here, because the rumors stem from Jim Knowles recently getting engaged, and that his soon-to-be fiance, I'm getting this from message boards from Oklahoma, his soon-to-be fiance is unwilling to move to Ohio and wants to stay in Oklahoma. And so now Jim Knowles is going to take the defensive coordinator position at Oklahoma, so that way he can be with his fiance. Again, nothing like this would ever happen in any other sport than college athletics, which is one of the reasons why I love college football. But Zach, I mean, do you buy these rumors at all? Obviously, there's other stuff there as well with Brent Venables and the mastermind. He is on defense, the opportunity to work with him and stuff like that. But I just I don't see Jim Knowles leaving a very possible national championship team to go to a school where Brent Venables is most likely fired next year if he doesn't win more than 6 games.
Yeah, I mean, the only way it is true is if he has a fiance that is like, we can't live in Ohio. I mean, from the perspective that he has another year with Caleb Downs, like,
Yeah.
I mean, I get
Who do you love more, Jim, your fiance or Caleb Downs?
I mean, I, I think we're both, we're pro marriage, pro follow your, care
Of
for your wife,
course.
but also
I'm
like,
just messing around. Yeah.
maybe talk to your future spouse and be like, do you know how much more secure my job's going to be if I stay in Columbus? From a football perspective, there is no reason whatsoever that this is a good move.
Yeah.
And that's not me being a homer. That's me saying Ohio State pays their assistants the best out of anybody. He's making $2.2 million.
He's the
And
third highest paid. He's either the third highest paid coordinator or the third highest paid defensive coordinator, one of those two in all of the country.
yeah, like Ohio State's going to take a step back next year with all the players leaving, but you're going to have you have a stable ground there. And as much as, people were calling for Ryan Day's head, that's over. Even if he loses the national championship game, it's over. Like, he's proven himself. Brent Venables is like going to be done next year. And you're going to go coach for a guy who has his own system and like might want you to hand some of the keys over to him. Like, that just seems like a terrible idea all the way around.
Sonny Verma says Ohio State fans were ready to fire Ryan Day a month ago. Not sure how stable we're talking about. You do make a good point, Sonny. I will say though, the administration was never going to fire Ryan Day. Fans wanted it, but I mean, any logical fan knew they weren't going to fire Ryan Day. Ross Bjork wasn't going to do that. in his first year there. The buyout is too big. I mean, he has too good of a record. Yes, the Michigan problem is definitely a problem, but
Yep.
as far as I'm concerned, like, and we said it when we did our analysis, like Ohio State's not firing him.
Yeah.
The only way this happens is if the fans are brutal enough that Ryan Day takes another job someplace else, which sure that could
Could have
happen,
happened.
but I don't see it happening.
It gets
At least not right now. Maybe back then.
If Ohio State wins the national championship, they will have gone on the greatest run in history because this has never been done before. And they will have beaten the number 1, 3, 4, and 7 teams all in a row. You like that guarantees Ryan Day another 3 years minimum.
Well, and I mean, I just say look at Urban Meyer. Like, he had a lot of stinkers after he won his national championship. I mean, now he never lost to Michigan, so that helps a lot. But 31-0 against Clemson. Was that his only playoff appearance after they won? He squandered the 2015
that was
season.
His only other playoff appearance.
Yeah, his only other playoff appearance, other than when he won it all, was when he lost 31-0 against Clemson. Like, and people still look at Urban Meyer and say, "Oh, well, one of the greatest coaches in, Ohio State history," which I'm not arguing with, but like you beat Michigan and you win a national championship, vice versa, you are beloved forever in Columbus, and Ryan Day is one game away from winning that national championship. I guarantee you, if Ryan Day wins a national championship and he loses to Michigan next year, there will be fans that are mad. But there will also be fans that say, "Oh, we got the playoffs." And what has Ryan Day done in the playoffs?
Yeah,
he's got a super good record, and they'll be excited for it. So,
although
I don't know. Do you feel different on that?
No. I'll say this though: I would not be surprised they miss the playoff next year with their schedule and who they're losing. But yeah, I agree.
They have an easier schedule next year.
They start
you don't think they have an easier?
They start with Texas.
Yeah, but it's at home. Texas at home. Really, your only tough road game outside of Michigan is Washington.
They get Penn State at home. That's going to be a tough game.
Yeah, but it's at home.
I don't know that. Like, for all the hand wringing we just said about Drew Aller, like that. There's a lot of smoke that a lot of guys are coming back, and
I'm sure they are.
I don't know. I just think a lot of new blood, new quarterback.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I just look at it. I just look at it in comparison to this year. You saw Oregon on the road. You saw Penn State on the road. You saw, people can argue about how good they were, but you have Indiana at home, and then you had Michigan at home. This next year, you get Texas at home. You get Washington on the road, which Washington is no powerhouse, but they do very well at home. I guess I shouldn't say they're no powerhouse. They were not a powerhouse this season. Next year they could be much better. Fair. They were in the national championship.
They go to Illinois.
Oh, they do go to Illinois?
Yeah.
I missed that one.
And they play Minnesota at home. Like, that's not I'll put it this way. It's not.
Yeah, but they played Iowa at home last year too.
Yeah. Texas and Michigan and Penn State are the marquee games. And then Illinois, I think Illinois, Minnesota, and Washington are sneaky.
I guess.
And Wisconsin. And at Wisconsin. They play Wisconsin and Illinois back to back.
Yeah.
On the road.
The only reason I'm entertaining this Ohio State talk so much is because we do have a lot of Ohio State fans in the chat. So we appreciate you guys being here. No, it's okay. But I was just going to say, like, I look at this year's schedule compared to that one. Like, I mean, no disrespect to Illinois at all. Like I said, I think Illinois is going to be a top 10 team, or they should be considered a top 10 team. But, like, at Illinois and at Washington, I would take that over at Oregon, at Penn State.
That's fair.
So, but you're also correct. They have Texas. They didn't have a big out of conference game this last year. So, but yeah. Bootzilla said, "I'm not sold on Illinois. They had a nice year, but let's slow down on them." I mean, they had a nice year and they're bringing everybody back. So
they beat the anointed SEC juggernaut of South Carolina.
Yeah.
Like, no, they deserve a lot of flowers, man.
Yeah. No, I'm not saying that they're like a lock for the playoffs or anything like that, Bootzilla. I hope you don't hear me saying that, but I look at them and I look at all these other teams too. Like if we're gonna look at Auburn and say Auburn had a really good transfer portal class, which is what Andy Staples and Ari Wasserman did, and say, oh, they belong in the top 10. It's like, okay, come on, like Illinois is gonna be better than Auburn, like so that's kind of the way I'm looking at it. Maybe somebody else needs to put out a top 10. Maybe we need to put out a top 10, Zach. Oh gosh.
After the season, after we see all the transfer portal stuff.
Yeah. So, but yeah. All right. Zach, let's take a break and then we'll come back and we'll do our power rankings, our end of the season power rankings. When Zach and I come back, we will have our power rankings, end of the season power rankings. It's been some shakeups. We've seen the playoffs, we've seen the bowl games, with Ohio State being the only Big Ten team left. I don't think a win or loss to Notre Dame would affect my rankings at all. So I felt like we could do our end of the season power rankings here. So stick with us. We'll be right back. Home Field is your go-to destination for premium collegiate apparel with a passion for comfort and a flair for vintage design. Home Field brings you gear that is comfortable and stylish. With over 150 colleges to choose from, Home Field digs deep into the archives, uncovering forgotten logos, iconic mascots, and legendary moments to create one-of-a-kind apparel. Use my code TBTH for 15% off for new customers, or use my link in the description. Back here on the Big Ten Huddle. If you like that the Big Ten is dominating the SEC, like the video. If you don't, you will actually be turned into an SEC fan, and you will have to sing Rocky Top and root for your rival in every game. So you don't want that. So like the video. All right. Wow. So Zach, these are our power rankings. We both have Ohio State at the top. In fact, we have the same top 5. Ohio State, Oregon, Penn State, Indiana. Top six. Illinois, Michigan is both our 6. Now, you have Iowa a little bit lower than I do. You have them at 9. I have Iowa at 7. And then you have Minnesota at 7th. I have Minnesota at 8th. And then it's just a little bit of shuffling here and there because you have USC at 8th. I have USC at 10th. I have Nebraska at 9th. You have Nebraska 10th. And then we have Rutgers, Washington. We've swapped Wisconsin and UCLA, and then we've swapped Northwestern and Michigan State, and then Maryland and Purdue. So, Zach, let's talk about the top 6 really fast. Was that an easy decision for you? And then we'll get into some of our differences in about 7 through 10. Go ahead and talk about the top 6.
Yeah, I mean, I think I don't know how you would have it any other way. I think Ohio State has shown that they are the best. They are finishing as the best team in the Big Ten by dominating Oregon. They beat Penn State. They beat Indiana. They didn't play Illinois. Now, obviously, we won't talk about their game against the 6th-ranked team in our power rankings, but they are clearly the best team right now in the Big Ten. And I don't think you can take anything away from Oregon, whose only loss was to Ohio State. And so, like, I think those top 2 make sense. I don't think you can drop Penn State below Indiana because they got to the semifinals. And then I think you have to reward Indiana for getting to the playoff, right? Like, I don't think you put Illinois above them. And Illinois had 10 wins. It was a heck of a season. And then Michigan, it's like, well, who are you going to put at that 6th spot? Do you put Iowa there? They have 8 wins. Minnesota. It's like you put the team that beat Ohio State and Alabama at 6. Like, I just think logically those 6 in that order, I don't know how you go outside of that.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I think there could be some pushback from some Oregon fans saying Oregon won the Big Ten and Oregon was 1-1 against Ohio State. So you win the Big Ten, you should be number 1. Maybe if Ohio State, Oregon in the playoffs was like super close and it came down to the last play, similar to how it did in Eugene, I might say Oregon over Ohio State just because of the Big Ten title. But I mean, Ohio State just thoroughly dominated Oregon, and I know they had some guys out. I know Jordan James got hurt early in that game. I know Evan Stewart didn't play, but you had to keep it closer than that. I think we have seen the best version of Ohio State, and the best version of Ohio State is the best team in the Big Ten. Call me a homer if you want, that's fine, but I don't think anybody has a valid argument for
Nope.
Oregon being over Ohio State. And if your valid argument is that Oregon had more rest time and so they were rusty against Ohio State, I'm very concerned with how you do rankings in college football if that's if that's
I
one of the ways that you are going to argue this.
I know we don't have time, but on Tuesday, can we talk about that argument from Oregon fans? Because I think it's dumb. And
I
it's
mean, we can talk
about
about
the
it right now if
bracket.
you want.
Well, maybe this is a teaser for next episode because I keep hearing, well, if Oregon didn't have to play Ohio State, ... And I'm like, guys, the reality is it doesn't matter. You need to win the next game. You were going to meet up with Ohio State at some point, and nothing about that Rose Bowl made me think that Ohio State would lose to Oregon in the semis or the quarters, or that was the quarters, in the semis or in the championship game. Like, I think we saw that Oregon at their best. I mean, I don't think Oregon was at their best, but Ohio State was up 34-0. Like, it was over.
Yeah.
I don't know what we're talking. They weren't. You got to win the darn game when you have it on your schedule. Like, I'm sorry, Notre Dame's not complaining of having to play Indiana and Georgia, and by the way, Ohio State's not complaining about having to play Tennessee, Oregon, and Texas, which is an absurd gauntlet, by the way.
And I think quite the opposite. I think Ohio State fans are excited. I mean, obviously they're excited because they won. I don't know. Maybe they'd be feeling different if they had lost, but
Oregon fans should be upset at Michigan and Ohio State because that's why Ohio State was there.
I think Oregon fans should be more upset with the stupid narratives that come out more than anything else, because there will be narratives out there of like, well, James Franklin has more playoff wins than Dan Lanning, which, like, both are good coaches. Nothing should be taken away from either of them. I actually tweeted it because I wanted to see if there was any reaction from it. There wasn't much reaction, which was fine. I didn't really care. I just wanted to see. I didn't say anything. I just tweeted the fact of James Franklin has 2 playoff wins and Dan Lanning has none. But to me, it was interesting to see that nobody really reacted to it. So hopefully that means nobody will, be that stupid to, use that as an example. But it always could happen. So, we'll see. But the way I look at this is you have to, if you want to be the best, you got to beat the best. And so even if you have an easy road with 2 games of Clemson and Arizona State, you're still going to run into a Notre Dame and Ohio State, and you got to beat them. And I really don't think timing matters all that much. I think it comes down to your mentality as a team, how well you're coached, how good you are, that kind of stuff. So, all right. I don't think there's any justification for Indiana over Penn State. Obviously, Illinois, if they had not lost to, like, who was it they lost to? Did they lose to Rutgers or Minnesota? Was it Minnesota?
They lost to Minnesota. Yeah.
If they had not lost to Minnesota, there could have possibly been some justification there to be over Indiana. But I mean, Indiana also, their only 2 losses this year are to the 2 teams that are in the national championship. So, like, now granted, neither one was close, but still, those are the only 2 teams you lost to. And then Michigan, Illinois beat Michigan. I don't know what else to say. They beat them. It is what it is. Granted, it was at home for Illinois, but still.
Mm-hmm.
Were you going to say something?
Nope.
Okay. All right, let's talk about 7 through 10. I have Iowa, Minnesota, Nebraska, USC. You have Minnesota, USC, Iowa, Nebraska. What's your thought process on Minnesota being up there at the top, and then just go down to Nebraska being at the bottom?
Yeah, I weighted, I think, how teams were at the end of the season more than anything. So I think Minnesota, I thought, played really well down the stretch. And I think if Minnesota and Iowa played now, I think Minnesota beats them. And I know Iowa beat them earlier in the season. And I think that's a fair take. I think you could have Iowa ahead of Minnesota.
Are you basing that off Iowa's bowl game, or are you basing that off?
I think
like just how
even
they
just
ended the season.
even just the way they played against Nebraska, and I didn't think Iowa looked great, especially with the quarterback situation, Cade, Brendan Sullivan injuries, all that stuff. So that was, but I think the bowl game even was part of it too. And I know the bowls don't matter as much as they used to, but I think it mattered to me, and I think even just putting SC over Nebraska, like USC had a better bowl win. Like Texas A&M is a stronger team than Boston College with you know, it wasn't a backup. They replaced their quarterback, I think. But I just felt like Minnesota and SC finished a little stronger than Iowa and Nebraska. But I don't have really strong arguments for the order. I think the way you have it is very reasonable as well.
Yeah, Tyler's here. What's up, Tyler? Thanks for being here, man.
Hey,
Zack and JR, he says. And Doug's saying hit the like button. It's free. Appreciate that, Doug. Yes, everybody, please hit the like button. That helps us out a lot. Yeah, no, so my only take on why I would put Minnesota over Iowa, I didn't do it, but my only take for that would be that I felt like it was a bad matchup for Minnesota. Minnesota has a very strong pass defense, and Iowa, they weren't going to pass the ball when you have a strong pass defense and you have Caleb Johnson. So, Minnesota did have a very good defense, but it was more effective against teams that, pass the ball more. And that just wasn't what Iowa did. And you look at it like that was also a game that was earlier in the season, and Minnesota was still kind of finding their identity at that point. Mm-hmm. Now, to me, you have to have a completion of the entire season in order to be ranked as highly. I mean, that's one of the jobs as a coach is to know your team when you're going into the season. If you don't know your team by then you're behind the eight ball. That's some of the criticism that PJ Fleck and Sherrod Moore, I think, deserve. Mm-hmm. But if we had seen Michigan and Minnesota playing the way they did at the beginning of the season, the entire season, you're looking at an 8 or 9 win Minnesota team, and you're looking at not considering the bowl game, you're looking at an 8 or 9 win Michigan team. I mean, Michigan probably doesn't drop the game to Washington if they have a better identity of who they are. Michigan probably doesn't drop the game. Who was another game that they dropped that they probably wouldn't have dropped?
Oh, man. Honestly, maybe Indiana.
Yeah, they probably don't. They probably don't drop that Indiana game if they have a better identity of themselves. That really seemed like that was the game right before they found their identity. Or they found their identity enough, which was interesting. But, yeah, I mean, they could have been a 9-win team this year if they had just found that identity and Sherrod Moore had leaned into it more.
Well, and it would have been 10 because they got their 8th win against Alabama. So it would have been 10. Yeah.
I was just talking about regular season, but you're right. They would have got to 10 overall in that one. So, hey, who knows? They might have played a tougher bowl game, though, Zach, if they had gotten to 9 wins. Maybe they'd had a tougher bowl game.
They might actually, ironically, they might have been the 9-3 team that would have gotten in the playoff because it's like, your losses are to Texas and you beat Ohio State at the end of the season. Like,
their losses are to Texas. If they are 9-3, their losses are to Texas. If they beat Indiana, who were the other two?
I'm looking it up right now.
I'm forgetting Michigan's schedule off the top of my head.
But yeah, they would have beat if they beat Indiana and Ohio State to end the season. Hold on. Let me look at this here.
Yeah, because if they would have beat Indiana and Washington, they would have been 9-3. Their losses would have been to Illinois, Texas, and who's the third one?
Let me see. They lost to Oregon.
Oh, then yeah, they would have been in.
Yeah.
If they would have found them, so that'd be crazy. I don't know if they would have been in. They would have been very close to being in. They would have been considered.
Yeah.
But SEC bias might have got them. Who knows?
Yeah.
Joe says, the narrative around Michigan was bizarre this season. IU beats them by 5, and they're bad. Then they beat OSU. They're still bad, ? And OSU is bad, ? I don't get it. It was, to me, I just felt like it was missing identity. all season long. I think once they found that identity, I think they found it against Indiana. They weren't able to finish out that game, unfortunately for them. But they found it, I believe, against Indiana, and then they ended the season with some good wins, and then they just had a really tough schedule this season too. I mean, you're playing Oregon, you're playing Texas. Both those games are at home, but obviously those were two of the best teams in the country. You're going to Washington. Washington is one of the toughest places to play in the country. I don't care how bad Washington is. It's not an easy place to play at. You played Indiana this year, who was one of the most confident teams in the nation when you played them. They were playing for playoff hopes at the time, like all that stuff. I really felt like it was a first-year head coach who didn't know the identity of his team yet, which is really hard to find. Like that's something that PJ Fleck struggled with at the beginning of the season. Now he figured it out quicker than Sherrone Moore did, but I think that's probably because of his experience and knowing how to coach you a little bit more.
I amazingly, hindsight's 2020, because I think we did. We were pretty brutal against Michigan, but they played 4 playoff teams in their regular season, and and then they played a 5th top 25 team in Illinois. Like that's an insane schedule. Looking back, and I think Sherrone Moore gets he deserves a lot of credit for kind of righting the ship the way he did, and he's still got some things to work out in how he coaches, but I think looking back, this season was much more of a success than people I think realize.
I gave Michigan a better regular season grade than I gave Ohio State. When Eric and I did it, he called me. I don't remember what he called me, but he said something about me, giving Michigan a better grade. And I was like, look, dude, they got Bryce Underwood. They had a first-year head coach. And, yes, they had all that NFL talent, but they righted the ship at the end of the year, and they beat their rival. If you're not happy about the season if you're a Michigan fan, but there is some joy you get out of it, I guess.
Oh, yeah.
So anyway, we keep talking about Michigan. We're supposed to be on 7 through 10.
Nice.
USC, they get the win over Texas A&M in the bowl game. I held that one. I really didn't hold it in much regard. I honestly was going to put USC at 12th, and then I thought back to that bowl game, and I was like, no, like Texas A&M came in not at full strength, but still pretty good strength in that game. USC had lost a number of players as well. Like that was a pretty even matchup with the amount of players that they had lost. So I look at that game and I say USC and Ohio State were the only teams in the country this season, if I'm not mistaken, to beat 2 SEC teams.
Yep.
Or no, Notre Dame, because they beat Texas A&M and Georgia. So you're looking at it, USC, Ohio State, and Notre Dame are the only teams this year that beat 2 SEC teams. Didn't lose to an SEC team either. Yeah. So, like, at a certain point, we got to give Lincoln Riley credit, and he did have a bunch of close games this year. They just weren't able to pull out. So maybe I am too low on him at 10th, but a part of me also is just like benching Miller Moss. I still think it was the wrong decision. I'm not saying Jaden Mayoff is going to be bad this year. I think it probably was a better decision to roll with Miller Moss, but that's just me.
Yeah, for all the hand wringing about Georgia's hard schedule, and they had the second hardest schedule. The 2 hardest schedules in the Big Ten: UCLA at 1, according to Sagarin, USC at 4, and I think that matters. Like you look at Sagarin ratings. Southern Cal is 21 in their power rating for Sagarin. So like that's higher than higher than the Texas A&M team that they beat, higher than Iowa, higher than Minnesota, higher than Illinois. So I don't think Sagarin's everything, but I do think you have to give credit that they played a really hard schedule. I said before the season, like in preseason, I don't know if they'll make a bowl game. And they did. And by the skin of their teeth, but they did, and they got a win against the second SEC team. I think it's a big deal.
Yeah, it almost makes up for the loss to Maryland.
Just had to throw that one in there.
Well, and it wasn't even in September either, Zach. It wasn't even in September. I mean, I would have understood a little bit more, but no, I'm kidding. But yeah, USC. I mean, they did have some pretty tough road games. They went to
Yeah.
Michigan. They went to Minnesota. They went to Washington. Like Washington was literally 6-0 at home this season and 0-6 on away in neutral site fields this year. It was just it is crazy how much better Washington played all season at home than
Yeah.
anybody else. Yeah, and Jeff saying it. He says, "Thanks for being here, Jeff." He says USC was very close to winning 3 more games. Blew what fourth quarter leads? Yeah, I mean they blew it in games, and they could have games they could have won, and they would have been what 9-3, another Michigan situation.
Yeah.
Like you don't lose to Maryland, you don't lose to. I mean, that was really the only easy loss they had. They should have beat Washington, I think, the way that game went.
Yep.
But yeah, so all right. Look, everybody's telling you guys
Thanks,
to hit
Eric.
the like button. Look at that. Thanks, Eric. All right. The last, I mean, I don't know if we really want to even lump them in, but 11 through 18 there, we got a couple things switched, but for the most part, we got everything. I mean, is there any argument for Wisconsin higher? Is there any argument for, Washington lower or anything like that? Like, do you have any arguments here at all, Zach?
Listen, I really thought that Purdue should be like 13th,
Yeah.
but then I was like, no, they suck. I'm
Great
sorry.
analysis.
I'm sorry. I love Purdue. My guy DK.
Look, they
love
are in
you, but
basketball season now. They could not care less.
Yeah. They had a great actually, you could make an argument that they should be above Maryland because they actually hired a competent coach. Anyway, you guys know how I feel about Mike Locksley. Wait, hold on. Did I see that the Jets were interviewing Mike Locksley?
Yep.
Was that for like the janitor job? Like, what
no,
are the Jets? What are the Jets
think it was for
doing?
the head coaching. I think honestly, what I think is happening is I think Mike Locksley knows his days are numbered at Maryland, and so at this point he's just trying to get his name out there anywhere and everywhere to do anything. But it is hilarious that out of all the Big Ten coaches, the one that got a NFL head coaching interview was Mike Locksley. He's 17th in both of our power rankings.
But it's for the Jets. So like they make dumb decisions all the time. So like we're just
it'd be on par for the Jets, huh?
Apparently the Bears are going after Marcus Freeman, and like Marcus Freeman's too smart for that. He's not going to the Bears. Yeah. Like, what do you do? Like that's not happening. I think you could make arguments for Wisconsin being lower or higher. I just think I thought Rutgers was clearly 11 because they were 7-6. They competed with a pretty good Kansas State team in their bowl game. I thought they finished the year well. And I thought Washington was clearly 12 because they went to a bowl game. I thought 13 through 18, all those teams did not make bowls. I'm like, you can't really argue for those 6 to be above the other 2. And yeah, like I think the way we had it out, like I could see Michigan State, Northwestern flip. I could see Wisconsin, UCLA flip.
Yeah, at this point, you could put Purdue 11th, and I wouldn't argue. I don't care about the bottom half anymore. So I'm just joking. No, I'm just joking.
You heard it here, folks. Purdue 11th, JR.
Yeah, put Purdue 11th. No, I'm just messing around. No, I think Michigan State had the opportunity to be higher than 15th, possibly. The win over Iowa this season was good for them, but they had so many clunker and stinker performances as well. They had a real chance to beat Michigan earlier this season, and they weren't able to get it. So stinks for them. But yeah, I don't think there's much argument. I mean, there wasn't a bowl game or anything, and Rutgers and Washington both lost their bowl games. So I honestly did not even touch 13 on down. What I had after the last game of the season at 13 on down is what I kept because they didn't do anything else.
That's smart.
So
that's smart. Penn State guy is saying Tom Allen might go to Clemson.
Yeah, I was going to bring that up and see what you think. Let me change the graphic really fast just in case you want to turn it into a video. If we talk about it for a while, I might. All right. Penn State guy says very good chance Tom Allen goes to Clemson in the world now, though not definite just yet. I think he's saying what in the world.
No, in the works. In the
Oh, in
works.
the works. I
Yeah,
apologize.
yeah, yeah.
Okay, I saw his correction there now. Yeah, I don't know. Like this would be another ACC team poaching a coordinator from a Big Ten team. Again, Penn State doesn't release all of their financials, like
Yeah.
other schools do. So I don't know, but I mean, unless James Franklin just wasn't happy with the defense this year, I know there was issues with. It sounds so funny. I know there was issues with the play calling because Tom Allen would get so into it that he was hard to understand over the headset. So I don't like. I don't know. I don't know if maybe there was just some stuff like that wasn't working out, and maybe James Franklin is okay with him moving on. But I mean, we both said it last year. Like Tom Allen was going to go somewhere and be a very good Big Ten defensive coordinator.
Yeah.
I think he's been good this season. If I'm a Penn State fan, I don't want Tom
No.
Allen to go,
No.
especially having a third defensive coordinator in the next 3 years. Manny Diaz last year, Tom Allen this year.
Yeah.
You got to bring somebody else in. Like,
Yeah.
yeah.
It's the same thing with Minnesota that we were just talking about.
Okay. Penn State guy says Franklin wants Allen to stay. Okay.
Yeah. I think it might be a money thing, and it's not. This is one of those things, we don't know what Miami pays. We know what Clemson pays. Clemson, in terms of public institutions, they are third out of any school in terms of paying their assistants, only behind Georgia and Ohio State.
Yeah.
So if you're going to go to an ACC school, Clemson is the school to go to. Yeah. And like Dabo has championship pedigree. He's won 2 national championships. He won the ACC this year.
Not anymore, though. Does anybody actually believe Dabo can win another national championship?
I think he could catch lightning in a bottle.
Of course he can. I don't want to ever say nobody cannot. I think that's stupid when people say like, "Oh, this coach can't win it all." Obviously, anybody can, but like James Franklin or Dabo Swinney, who do you think has a better chance to win a national championship?
Dabo.
What?
You don't Absolutely Dabo.
No, Franklin.
Okay, explain yourself.
No, I definitely think James Franklin. James Franklin just went to the semifinals in the playoffs. James Franklin is able to recruit. James Franklin takes in transfers. James Franklin is building his program, like hiring actual assistants and actual coordinators, not just like bringing in guys from the bottom on up. Like he's going out and like actually hiring a staff behind him. Dabo has gone out and he's like, "Oh yeah, you used to be the quarterback coach. You can be offensive coordinator now." And he's done it multiple times. Like, and he doesn't take in transfer. I know he got the Purdue guy this year, but he doesn't take in transfers. Like he is very much so, like just against the new age of NIL and transfer portal and everything. Please put it in the chat. Like, who do you think is more likely to win a national championship going forward? Don't even think about the past. Going forward, who do you think is more likely to win a national championship, James Franklin or Dabo Swinney? Explain yourself now.
So I agree with what you're saying. I think Franklin and Dabo are like a year apart in their evolution. Because I think James Franklin was all the things that you just said about Dabo. But I think Franklin similar, and he kind of alluded to it in his press conference for the Orange Bowl, was like, they're an old school team. This is a team that, people in the 70s and 80s would love. And I think he's referring to like a lot of their team had been there for a long time. And he hasn't used the portal a ton. He's used it some. I think Dabo is starting to go there. And I think if he hires Tom Allen, he's showing that he's starting to go after big name assistants. And the reality is the ACC will always be an easier path. It'll be an easier path for conference championships, which means an easier path to get automatic buys or higher seeds or automatic entry into the playoff. And Penn State's not always going to, Penn State's going to have to compete in a conference where USC might get it together and where Oregon has it together and Ohio State has it get together and Michigan's going to get it back together and yada, yada, yada. The Clemson's the big dog in the ACC, and it'll be that way for a while.
Okay. I hear you, and I hear the argument of like, what's an easier path to the playoffs? But then I also think like, what are you gonna do when you get to the playoffs, right? Like, I don't know. Like, yes, obviously, winning the ACC as Clemson is easier than winning the Big Ten as Penn State right now. But like, let's be honest though. The fourth place team in the Big Ten has a better chance of winning the playoffs than the ACC champion, just because of the way that you're able to accumulate talent and the way that you are set up with support from your conference financially and everything else. Like, yes, Clemson spends a bunch of money on their assistants, but how long is that going to last? You know? And we just talked about unstable situations. Like, you and I, when we did that Franklin video, we were both like, Franklin's not going anywhere. I know there were people that didn't hear that in the comments. I don't know, what they listened to, but like you and I were both like, Franklin's not going anywhere.
Yeah.
There are actively people in like Clemson fans that are like, fired Dabo Swinney because he won't change with the times. He won't improve. He won't get better. And Dabo Swinney is 100% the type of coach that will get into your game planning and say, like, you have to do this. We've done it this way before, so you have to do this now. And what happens if Brent Venables gets fired? Like, you think Tom Allen's going to stick around at Clemson if Brent Venables gets fired next year? Dabo's bringing him back. He'll fire Tom Allen in a second to bring Brent Venables back. I think this is a money play from Tom Allen.
Oh, sure. I think that's clear. I
think Clemson 6 years ago, clearly the better choice. But I think now you see how dysfunctional the ACC is. You see how it's possibly going to blow up. You hear people, conference insiders talking about how like nobody wants Clemson, nobody wants Florida State. Like, what's going to happen if Clemson goes independent? I know it looks really romantic with what Notre Dame has done going independent, but like people, like not just any program can do that. Notre Dame can do that because of their brand and how big they are.
Yeah.
Not just any program can do that. To
Clemson,
me, I'll say one more thing. To me, the stability of Penn State is so much greater. The opportunity for a head coaching job out of Penn State's DC position is so much greater. And Franklin, to me, I won't say is so much greater, but I'll say has a slight edge of a better opportunity to win a national championship. Not conference championships. I agree with you. He will have a better chance of winning the ACC, but I think if you're top 4 in the Big Ten from here on out, you're most likely going to be in the playoffs. Just don't lose to, 5-7 Michigan State.
Yeah, I mean, I think they're both tenuous. But I don't know. I still would give the slight edge to Dabo. And for right now, I think honestly, if James Franklin beats Ohio State next year, I would completely flip because it would then showcase, okay, you can beat the team that's terrorized you. But he needs to beat top 5 teams at some point, and he has not been able to do that. And I know I just got done saying, hey, we got to give Penn State credit for making the semis. Dabo, yeah, I think Dabo's he's maybe over the hill in his coaching career, but I'm always a little hesitant to be like, well, he can't recapture the magic. We know that he can beat more talented rosters, and he did it in 2016 and 2018. So I think that's just my thought process there.
Yeah. And I don't know. Maybe this is just me, but like what has happened to Ryan Day this season at Ohio State has just like completely gotten rid of the thought process to me that like, this coach has to do this in order for me to believe it can happen. Like the way James
Mm,
Franklin runs his program, he's gonna get there eventually. To me, I believe he will. Maybe I haven't seen it yet. I haven't seen him consistently beat top 5 programs, but I also didn't see Ryan Day consistently beat top 5 programs. I didn't see Ryan Day
yeah.
consistently beat big teams until Penn State and Notre Dame, which we'll see if that continues on the national championship. I think that's really funny too. But like he did, like he
Hmm.
changed, and he's won 3 playoff games in a row now. Has the opportunity to win the national championship. Is the hardest path possible. The hardest path
Yeah.
possible. There was no path in the playoffs that would have been harder than what Ohio State is going through. So I don't know. If Ryan Day can change and get rid of the narrative, I think James Franklin can too.
Yeah. Well, we'll see.
Do I think it'll
I
be at the same level? Probably not,
Yeah.
but I think he can.
I will say I think you and Doug make a really good point that Penn State is more stable in terms of their conference position. Like I think that's not a doubt.
Yeah.
If you're telling me just from a coaching perspective, who has a greater chance to win a national championship, I still think it's Dabo right now. But I think if James Franklin can change the narrative, great. But I want to see it. Dabo, I've seen him do it. So
Yeah. And I guess that's just the thing. Like, has the narrative changed on Dabo yet? That's the thing.
yeah.
So are we in a flux right now where Dabo's narrative is changing and James Franklin is trying to change his narrative? It's an interesting discussion. So, Tom Allen, you will probably make more money out of this. Congratulations. All
There you
right,
go.
Zach, I got to head on over to Locked On Illini and record with Sonny. So if anybody here, you're a basketball fan, you're an Illinois fan, check out Locked On Illini tomorrow. I'll be on with Sonny and talking about Big Ten football or Big Ten basketball power rankings. And also, I have a new spot I'm doing for basketball as well. ESPN in Iowa. I am on their radio
Ooh.
station doing a guest spot on Monday afternoons. I believe it's at 5 their time, so 4 Eastern time, or no, that'd be 6 Eastern time. But yes, if you would like to hear that, you can head on over to Twitter, and I'll be retweeting that over there as well. So, Zach, you got anything going on you want to let people know about?
No, I will drop an episode probably in the next couple days, and then. But yeah, just excited to keep detailing the Big Ten with you here at the Big Ten Huddle. So.
There we go. We'll be back on Tuesday night. We've never really done this, but I do go through the comments. Some videos I go through less than others. The James Franklin video right now, I have not gone through all 141 comments because most of them are incoherent at this point. So I don't go through all those, but I do go through the live ones quite a bit. So if you guys have any like ideas for off-season topics you want us to talk about, obviously we're going to preview the national championship game. Would you guys be interested in hearing about like hot seat coaching, like coaches in the Big Ten next season, anything like that? Like, let me know. Don't put it in the chat because I can't see the chat afterward. Please put it in the comments after the video is over. But I'd love to hear that. So we appreciate you being here, Zach. We appreciate you listening, you being here and talking about everything as well. And if you listen on podcast and you would like to submit an idea, just email me, jrsrankings@gmail.com, jrsrankings@gmail.com. You can always get in contact with me over there. So thanks so much for watching, everybody. Thanks so much for listening. We appreciate it. See you next time.